Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to I Found an Abandoned Grave and Learned Her Story by Forgotten Lines. Now this is a channel that I recently did a reaction to. I got a really good response from my core audience. The views on the video didn't do quite as well as I was hoping, but the amount of comments I got and likes versus the amount of views told me that my core audience really loved it. I really enjoyed that video, so we're gonna watch this one. What we learned in the last video is that this channel is largely about this genealogist. I forgot what his name is. I don't know if he actually mentioned it in the last video. Maybe he did. And basically he finds old pictures and photos and things and then kind of does the genealogy on them. So with this one, it's going to be based on an abandoned grave. So with all of that said, let's just jump on into it and see what he's got to say.
In this video, I'm going to show you a tombstone that we found way up on top of a hill and far back in the back of a rural cemetery. And this stone was almost completely gone. And then I'm going to show you what I found out about this person. And then I'm going to show you how I did that. I'm James from Forgotten Lines, and we're a small team who likes to look for old cemeteries or old pictures and think, I wonder who that was. Or I wonder if that person has a story that we can tell. You know, we didn't know if they had any family to remember them or even to come visit them. I wanted to see if we could find out a little bit more about this person so that we could maybe keep their memory alive for just a little bit longer. Now, with a stone in this kind of condition, would it be possible to learn a little bit more about this person? Or are the only people who remember them, are they gone too?
More than likely, there's a lot of records on whoever that person is, especially assuming that they're in the United States. Now, of course, sometimes maybe there's not a lot of records, especially if that person, for some reason, went by an alias or there was something that would cause difficulties in finding them in the records. But more than likely, you'll find them somewhere, and I'm sure he does.
I'm going to show you what I was able to find. We've all seen tombstones in our lifetimes, or antique photos, or even read obituaries. Well, on a stone, there are usually two dates. And between those two dates is that one little line. And that little line represents that person's entire life. Whether it was 5 years or 95 years. There was a lot of memories and a lot of stories that happened in between those. And while we won't be able to learn much about those people usually, it is nice to think that possibly we can learn something about this ordinary person who lived an ordinary life. And now they're gone forever, but they have some memories that maybe we can pass on. Now, this grave we found during a visit to a very remote cemetery deep in the woods. I don't imagine very many people visit this site, so it was very quiet and very somber to look around. And this particular tombstone jumped out at us for just a few reasons. One, it was relatively large.
And I'm seeing the dates. I see 1910 to 1928. So I guess died at about 18 years old. And a name like Culberson. That's probably a fairly rare name. And then, of course, depending on the area that they're in, how well populated that is, or especially was around the beginning of the 1900s, that could help in terms of being able to find that. Because for all we know, you look up Culberson in this area, and then there's hundreds of them, and then, 20 with the same name that she has, which is hard to say. Claudius May? Something like that? I don't know. I guess hopefully he'll be able to tell us.
To the others around it. Number two, the coloration of the stone from the moss and growth made it just kind of pop out. Number three, the horizontal cracks and lines made it look like it could fall apart and disintegrate at any minute.
It looks like it already is.
Was the name. D-A-U, or daughter, Gladys May Culberson. I thought it would be quick and easy to find such an uncommon name. But no, it was not. It's uncommon because it is horribly misspelled on the stone.
Now, that's actually something I've seen before. And in fact, for my third great grandmother, Bessie, her stone, her name is spelled completely wrong. And I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's her. Everything else seems right, the dates and all of that. But Bessie spelled B-A-C-C-E-E or something like that. Like it was Basie or something. And then the last name should be Dudes, D-U-D-E-S. but instead it was Dudies, Dudies. And then when we saw the Hebrew on the stone, it was like, okay, yeah, whoever did the inscription didn't know Hebrew. Like, some of the stuff they got right, some of it they got very, very wrong. And when you know what should be right, you can tell, oh, well, they were probably going off of some writing someone had, and they just didn't fully understand it. But I think that's something that a lot of people would find surprising, that you have tombstones that will have incorrect names, incorrect dates on them. I find that very commonly, that the date of death will be different on the stone than what the death certificate says. But of course, there's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, and that sometimes they'll see the date of burial and think that's the date of death, but obviously it usually isn't. Usually there's a little bit of time between the death and the burial.
So we went to the library because our library happens to have a very detailed book about every cemetery in the county and the people who are buried there.
That's
but
cool.
It is missing a few, like this one. It wasn't in that book. In fact, that entire cemetery was not in that book. That was interesting. First I used Family Search and Ancestry using the name on the stone, but nothing came up. So then I Google searched the cemetery and was able to pull up the Find a Grave listing for that site. Scrolled through all of the memorial listings until I found the matching stone. Someone had already taken a picture of it. And this researcher had determined that her name was actually Gladys May Culbertson Turner. She had been married, and even found her birth and death certificates. Now this gives us something to work with. BMDCs, or Birth, Marriage, Death Census, are oftentimes the only thing you can find on an ancestor or a person.
I was not going to get census because I was like, wait, birth, marriage, death certificate? Because BMDC, I mean, maybe that's a common thing amongst certain circles of genealogists or something, but I've only seen, BMD, but I mean, it makes sense, but that was just kind of funny. I was like, birth, marriage, death certificate. Oh, he's saying census.
Person you're trying to learn about. And in most cases, they give you plenty of clues to learn more about them, or at least fill in some blanks. Gladys was born in 1910 to Ernest Culbertson and Gertrude Warner. And she died in 1928 of a hemorrhaged ulcer at only 18 years old. The informant listed on her death certificate was actually her mother, Gertrude. Between those dates, there are only two censuses, one in 1910 and 1920, and a marriage license. In 1910, she's a baby with her mom, living in the house of Tom and Mary Ewing, who are listed as cousins, and her mom is using her maiden name. She's not using the name of Ernest Culbertson. However, in 1920, her mom vanishes from the census, but Gladys is still in Tom and Mary's house using her father's last name, and now she is listed as boarder, even though she was only 10 years old. I couldn't find her mom or her father in the 1920 census. Back then, people would list children on the census as boarders all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes this was because they may have been born out of wedlock, and there was a lot more public shame around that back then. So much so that women would often claim themselves a widow to avoid rumors and issues within their own community. Because sometimes it was easier to say you were a widow than their husband was gone, or there wasn't a husband at all. I don't know if that's the case with Gladys, but it certainly wouldn't have been out of the ordinary. But here, in 1927, she married William Turner, but she would die only 5 months later. Her husband William moved back home with his parents, and he would die 5 years later. So what can we say about the person behind this unique tombstone? Well, Gladys Culbertson lived a short life of only 18 years. She spent the majority of it living with the Ewings. I believe her mom was part of her life, but did not find evidence of her father being present using the usual BMDCs. She was married very briefly before a sudden health complication took her life. She never had children, and her husband would never remarry. Her foster parents afforded her a very nice tombstone in a cemetery where the rest of her family was buried. They lived about 20 more years and had several kids and grandkids. I'd like to think that the Ewings would have remembered Gladys as a sweet girl who was gone too soon and shared memories of her with their kids. So if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video.
All right, that was a pretty good video. Not quite as amazing as the last one I saw of his, where he's identifying an unknown photo with a gravestone. It's much more straightforward. You have the name, you have the dates. Obviously, this one took a little bit more, but, you know, utilizing a lot of the stuff that's available now, like he was talking about Ancestry, Family Search, Find a Grave, you know, all these are sites that make it so that nowadays a lot of genealogists, our work is like just finding that listing and then boom, you've basically got it right there, which is what happened in his research. I think it would have been really cool if he had been able to take the research further than what he had found, and maybe he tried and he just wasn't able to, but especially being that he's in the area that the grave was, and he, you know, went to the library, which had records available, or at least those booklets on cemeteries in the area. Well, maybe there are records that are available in a local library or an archive or something that's not available online, which is often the case. Now, you're not going to find that with every single person you're researching, but usually there's a lot of stuff available that just has not even been digitized yet. But he basically did the research just like I would have done it. Go on one of those big sites, Ancestry, Family Search, Find a Grave, look up that cemetery, look up that person, see what you can find, and then start pulling up more and more records. Although one thing that I would often do is, once you know who the person is, we'll go on Ancestry, and then you can look and see, are there people that have built trees for this person where they're a very close relative or something? And then if you want to reach out to people and connect with them when you're doing research like this, that's a great way to do that, is just finding people who've built trees with that person in it, and then go and see, how does that home person for that tree relate to whoever you're researching. And if you enjoyed this reaction, you'd like to see more reactions just like it, be sure to check out this video of mine right here. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.